Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hello, my name is Margaret Mandell, and I live and have always lived near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the USA. And I am now about an hour from the city in my most recent home in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where I have just written my debut memoir, And Always One More Time. Just launched it this year, and I'm currently on book tour. And I've been traveling all over the United States and into Mexico, and I've done some virtual conversations in other parts of the world. And I'm so honored to be here with you, Gertrude. My story is a very simple one, but a universal one. I was blessed with a most wonderful soulmate, best friend, and husband for 40 years, a physician, father of our two children. And he died rather unexpectedly and suddenly from an incurable disease 8 years ago. My grieving after his loss was channeled into writing him letters every day. For 4 years, I wrote 1,000 letters to him. And out of those letters came my current book, And Always One More Time. Some of the letters are in the book, but the book now, the arc of the narrative, is the story of losing my best friend and finding someone new, John. So it's a love story about two men, one living and one dead. And it's a story of trust. The universal themes in the book include not only healing from loss, which we all must do. Adversity is our best teacher. Adversity was my teacher. And I learned so much from the experience of losing the one person I cherished most in the world and finding my way back. And one of the ways I found my way back is I also reinvented myself. I became a certified yoga instructor at the age of 68. And that is my work now, as well as writing. So here I am with my book. And Always One More Time comes from Maya Angelou, who said, have enough courage to trust love one more time, and always one more time. That is the story of my life and my book. There are subplots and sub-themes in the book about the death of my mother, about the marriage of my daughter, about being a mother, having a mother, all of the key relationships that we women navigate throughout our lifetimes.
Okay, so let's start with the beginning and unpack your story. Can you share what inspired you to pursue a career as a writer? Was this because of the death of your husband, or had you been writing before?
That is such a beautiful question. I appreciate it so much. Writing seems to be my passion, and yet this is my very first book. I had been writing all my life uh, as part of my work, particularly in the epistolary form. Letter writing is perhaps a lost art in this day of rapid fire email and texting and very short form communication. But a letter is a fulsome, deep dive
Mm.
into the stirrings of one's heart, one's hopes and dreams. And as I said earlier, writing these letters to my husband was my way of both letting him go and keeping him close. And as anyone knows who has lost a loved one, and perhaps particularly a spouse, we enter a significant phase of denial. We simply cannot believe that the person is gone.
Yeah.
And so writing to this person as if the person is sitting right there was my version of sitting down at dinner time with him and asking him about his day.
Mm.
It was a conversation. But I had been writing since I was a small child, and I used writing to connect to my parents when I was sent away for the first time to summer camp and missed them horribly. I was horribly homesick. So what did I do? I wrote constantly,
Mm.
constantly. Later on, when my first husband, Herb, and I were separated for a summer, he was in medical school and I was in graduate school studying French, intellectual history. And I went over to Europe for the summer. What did I do? I wrote constantly every day to my soon to be husband, Herb. So writing is a lifeline.
Yeah.
Writing is a way to connect with people that you care deeply about. But here's my big discovery. Writing and always one more time, the letters and the story, and then turning it into a book and setting it loose on the world.
Mm.
My big discovery as a writer, and I am so sorry I waited almost 8 decades to write my first book, because there is no better way to connect with another person, with complete strangers, than through the pages of a book, in particular a memoir that you have written. It could be fiction, though. I've been told my book reads like a novel that just happens to be true. So I write to connect. I happen to have a gift for two things in the world. One is loving, and the other is writing. And so I deploy both of those gifts because it's all I have and it's the best that I have to give.
So, can you describe the transition from writing your personal letters to crafting a full memoir? What was that like?
I had no idea what memoir truly was. And so the crafting, as you say, Gertrude, it's the perfect word. The craft of
Mm.
writing a memoir is learning how to take the raw material of your life and polish it, polish it, polish it, polish it like a diamond until it absolutely shines, until there's not a wasted word, until the story just shimmers with your truth. And I had many, many truths to disclose. And I had to expose my deep fears and insecurities about being a woman alone. I had to talk about my worries about weather. I would be alone for the rest of my life, or I would find another soulmate. Crafting the book was a discipline. And I was very fortunate to have two extraordinary writing coaches who went with me line by line by line and helped me with what we call word surgery, removing words. And I had written 300,000 words, and my book in the end was 35,000 words.
Oh.
That is what it takes to craft a memoir. There's also the arc of the story and understanding the pace and the direction and the unfolding of the work of storytelling, and creating suspense and drama and resolution
Yeah.
and all of those things. I was learning. I had to learn as I went, as I was going, because this was the first time. For me, it was very, very easy to write the letters. I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and write another letter. But the work of revision and rewriting was deeply challenging.
Yeah, writing can be challenging, and they say that that first draft is only a first draft, right? A lot of people want to hold on to the first words they put on paper, but by the time that book is finished, you go over and over and over again.
You are so right. I read recently that your first draft is for you, and all
Yes.
future drafts are for everyone else.
Oh, I love that. That's a very nice way of putting it. So, what role does vulnerability play in your storytelling?
I am so vulnerable on the page that people who know me and who have read my book have said repeatedly, I could never do that. I could never disclose my deepest vulnerability in front of strangers on the written page and send it out into the world. It is also said that memoir, by definition, is connecting your vulnerability with the vulnerability of your readers.
Yes.
No one would be interested in reading my story if I didn't reflect back to my readers their fears and vulnerabilities and worries. To be human is to be vulnerable.
Yeah, that's really where the true connection comes.
Yes, we connect across our vulnerability. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said it perfectly.
So, what are some of the universal themes in your memoir that you hope readers will connect with besides love, which I think is the main and central theme?
Yes, it's a love story.
Yeah.
But the universal themes, the greatest takeaway, I think, for my readers is the possibility of resilience in the face of whatever is the worst thing that could happen to you or for you. And I know a little bit about your story, Gertrude, and I did immensely appreciate your TED Talk, in which you certainly disclosed your vulnerabilities and your triumphs over one adversity after another. And I believe this is what my story is about as well. Yes, I disclose vulnerability, but the hope and the possibility of overcoming whatever comes your way, whatever loss or death or tragedy occurs in your lifetime. The point is to keep going, to go on. That's resilience. Resilience is simply putting the next step forward in front of, one step in front of another after being toppled by life. I can't think of anything more universal for every human being than to find, for each of us, to find our way to resilience. That's the strength that burns inside each of us. And it was burning inside of me, and I didn't yet know it until I wrote my way through it.
I love it. So, what advice would you give to aspiring writers facing imposter syndrome or self doubt?
Every writer including moi, has imposter syndrome and self-doubt. If you think you don't, you're kidding yourself. So you're not ever going to write a book unless you want it so badly. You are unwilling to let anything get in the way.
Yeah.
You just have to want it badly enough. And that's true of
Mm-hmm.
everything, not just writing a book.
Yeah.
And it's the sheer persistence and desire to keep going, no matter what voices in your head are telling you you're not good enough, it's not good enough. You just have to want it so much that you keep at it. And one day there's a book.
It is that challenge of just taking it one step at a time, one day at a time, right?
One,
Until it gets
one word
done.
at a time, one comma at a time.
Oh, man. So, how do you define resilience and how has it reflected in your memoir?
There are so many places in the book, in the story that I tell. You know, during the early part of the book and the early part of my mourning and grieving and letting go, not only was I unwilling to accept the fact that Herb was gone and I was truly alone, but I could not imagine. I could not figure out who I was. It was an identity, a loss of identity. If you define yourself as someone's beloved and
Mm.
that beloved is no longer there, then you have lost your purpose for living and your connection. So my resilience and my story was finding purpose in life and reconnecting with other humans, forging new relationships, being useful and productive and purposeful in the world. So teaching yoga was a way that I found my way into being able to deliver something of value that was
Mhm.
helpful to other people. And I've helped a lot of people through the practice of yoga and teaching, opening up that world to my yoga students. So that was one way. And I describe in the book the yoga teacher training, which is very comical because I'm way older than the other people in the yoga teacher training class. And I am not as physically flexible. None of us is as we perhaps once were. So I
Yeah.
had to overcome all of the physical barriers to practicing and teaching yoga. I had to overcome that, but also accept my limitations and thereby help my students to accept their own limitations and then transcend them through the practice of yoga. That's the beauty of it. So
No,
all
that's
of this is part of the story as it unfolds in the book. So you add, that's part of the resilience. There's a physical resilience.
yes.
I had to overcome a near terminal medical situation less than a year after my husband died, where I became very, very sick and I was in the hospital and I nearly died. And I had to come back from that. And, you know, we all have our medical crises, we have our emotional crises, we lose jobs, we lose friends, we lose family. Resilience is about all of that. And I do find that people who read my book come back and say, well, if you could do it,
I can.
I can do it. And it is for that that I wrote the book. If
I
that is
love
the
that.
only takeaway, it was worth all the 8 years of writing and revising and rewriting. If one person can say, if you can do it, I can do it.
That is so beautiful. It does make it worthwhile because when you are going through your struggle, you have no idea what impact you're truly going to have on other people. And it sounds to me like you found your purpose, you found your reason for doing it, and now it's just empowering so many more. So, in terms of legacy and impact, how does it feel to see your story in print and being shared with the world? Now you're talking to somebody who's based in Australia. A whole lot of people in Australia, New Zealand are going to hear about your book. How does that feel?
I can't imagine a more sublime feeling than exactly that you described. I'm holding the book in my hands here, and the physical book, just to hold a physical book in my hands and open it up and turn the pages and see the print, is it does feel like a legacy. It does feel like my work is done here and I can, die tomorrow and I've left something in the world. And, it's up to others what will happen to it,
Yeah.
and what will be done with it. The other thing that I did was I recorded the entire book as an audiobook in my voice, which was a very important thing to do. The question of voice in memoir, I mean, what differentiates memoir from all other books is it's in the voice of the narrator. That's
Yes.
what memoir is by definition. And so you put your voice on the page. A critical reading of any memoir looks for voice. Is there a voice there?
Yeah.
One of the things that I was told as I was writing the book is that I happen to have a very distinctive voice. And I read in the New York Times an op-ed piece arguing that all memoirs should be read aloud in the voice of the memoirist. It was meant to be read aloud. The voice was meant to literally be heard. And so I set about doing this audiobook recording of my book. And it's also in the world for visually impaired people who cannot read it. And now they can
Yes.
hear me read it in my voice. So you asked about legacy, and it's very nice to leave a little legacy behind, not just of your words on the page, but
Mm-hmm.
your voice. It just says, she lived. She was here.
It was here.
She was here. She wrote this. She sounded like that. She was a woman who did her best.
It's truly inspiring. I can just see your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren picking up this book, years from now, and there you are. You have really immortalized yourself if you think about it that way.
I think all writers do that, of course, including you.
That is so true. So, what has been some of the most rewarding feedback that you've received since publishing the memoir?
I pay attention to the reader reviews for feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner of a bookstore in Santa Fe, New Mexico, to whom I sent my book, she was a perfect stranger, but I was planning a trip to Santa Fe, and I asked her if she would read my book and perhaps invite me to do a presentation or a reading at her store. She graciously invited me to send her my book in the mail. And I waited to hear back. And she said, I have to read the book to decide if I want to carry it in my store, if it's a fit with I mean, she's a curator of books. So I waited weeks and weeks and weeks. Finally, I hear back from her. And she sent me basically one line in an email. And she wrote, whenever I read an exceptional book, a sacred silence surrounds me. Your,
Oh,
your book is doing that to me right now. Please come to my store and read your book. And she was a perfect stranger. She did not know me.
oh, I love that. What a beautiful feedback.
There was another reader very recently who wrote, your book is about grief and gratitude. And what binds grief and gratitude together in your book is the vitality of every page that speaks to a life closely observed and well lived. We need our readers to hold up mirrors so we can see ourselves clearly as writers.
Mhm.
We need our readers to tell us who we are and what we've done. Right?
That is so, so true. Wow. Well, it sounds like the ripple effect and the impact is already there. So now let me take you into the past and into the future with my last two questions. If I could take you into the past to have a conversation with the younger you, that woman who's gone into the field of writing, is really transforming lives with the power of her words. What three nuggets of wisdom could you give her, just in case there is another woman listening to this podcast thinking about being a writer? What three nuggets of wisdom could you share?
Tomorrow is promised to no one. So don't wait. Jump right in. It's going to be okay.
And now let's teleport into the future and have a conversation with the future you, this wise woman who has led you to this point. You know, a lot of women don't realize that the wise woman is already in them. We doubt ourselves, we make decisions, and we think, oh, I can't do it. But you've listened to that little voice inside. She has been guiding you. What would you say to the future you if you were to have an opportunity to meet her at the age of 90 and she's sitting in her rocking chair, surrounded by her children, her grandchildren? What will you say to the future you when you finally meet her?
Well, I do know something about aging and old age and dying. And I learned that actually dying is not an event, it's a process. And it happens gradually over time. And it can be cruel and it can involve terrible pain and loss, physical and mental and otherwise. So I will say to the aging Margaret Mandell, who is only going to grow older in the future, to remember lying in that hospital bed 11 months after Herb died, when you said to yourself, you can do this. And remember that now, that until your last breath, you have more to give, more to do, and more to be.
Oh, wow. That is absolutely beautiful. Oh, it has been such a pleasure meeting you, Margaret, and such an inspiration. You are really an example of how we should live, right? Reinventing ourselves every step of the way, not letting life hold us back, going through the sadness, going through the positive things in life, but just knowing that you have to take it one day at a time, one step at a time. And what I really love about your story that has inspired me, because I went through a very traumatic divorce. I lost my soulmate. That love again is possible, for showing us all as women how to live. Absolute pleasure to have met you.
Gertrude, you are an inspiration, and I am deeply honored to have had the opportunity to speak with you today.
And thank you to our listeners. Thank you for all tuning in. As you know, the Her Story Circle is not just a podcast. We are a social impact movement, and we bring you the voices and stories of women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift you, to inspire you, to energize you, but most importantly, to take you from where you are now to where you're trying to go. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. Thanks again, Margaret. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.